Hello, Karen. It is amazing to have you on our very humble podcast.
Oh, thank
Um,
you. I'm glad to be here.
I loved meeting you the first time, and one of the ways that we do this is instead of me kind of waffling on about what you do, I would love you to talk a little bit about what you do, and then we've got a topic that you and I are going to kind of just have some fun discussing for people.
Okay, so what do I do? I write about uh, topics that a lot of people tend to shy away from. I write about difficult mother-daughter relationships, and I write about the effects that those difficult relationships can have on us. Uh, most most of the time it's around shame and unworthiness and how can we change our relationship to those things. um, I have a tendency to um, be able to draw connections um, from what I call the micro, which is perhaps, one woman and her mother struggling, or a mother struggling in her relationship with her adult daughter, and the macro, which is the thousands of years of systems and institutions and etc. that have got us to this place. And so it is, yeah, it's about dismantling what's inside of us that was never ours to begin with, that poisons our relationships, um, and in hopes that as we do that, we can change the world just a little bit. I can't hear you.
Aha, here we go.
Oh.
It always helps if I unmute myself. Um, um, I think what's interesting, actually, metaphorically about that is that a lot of men and women, and I'm not going to emphasize just women, have been so throttled and muted. Their real personalities and voices. I mean, I think it's the Aborigines who, so correct me if I'm wrong about this, if you know about it, but I believe that they don't name their children until their children are of an age where they name themselves.
I didn't know about that, but it makes sense.
I mean, one of my kind of themes that I attempt not to become too boring about is that I think our educational systems are teaching us sort of, if we achieve this, we're more than, and if we don't achieve this, we're less than, but we're never equal to. And the fundamental basis of life is that even though we're different, we are equal to each other, even if I'm more qualified or I'm less qualified or I'm poorer, richer, kinder, nicer, whatever it is. So
Yeah, the binaries that we use to categorize. Yeah.
yeah. So to meet someone who has the courage to go to what I call the roots of why we've got the signs and symptoms that we have of pandemics of loneliness and misery, and in many, many respects, complete inabilities to be able to reassure ourselves.
Mm.
And that's kind of what I wanted to play football with. I know that you don't have football, but I think you know what I mean by football. The football of this topic is going to be, how do we reassure ourselves when the noise outside is so loud. It tells me as an author that I haven't written enough books, or I haven't sold enough, or I'm building a membership and I haven't got enough. I'm not enough. What complete rubbish. If I can help 3 people, that is enough. If I
Yes.
get 2 reviews and help 2 people, that's enough. Who am I to say it's not enough? And I don't have to have the world telling me it's not enough. But
Yeah.
that's, I don't wish to be rude about myself, but I'm quite long in the tooth now. I love that expression. So, it's taken me a long time to walk out of this huge toxic time bomb of shame that I was brought up with, and unpick it and unravel it. And I'm not telling you or anybody else that I've got there completely, but I now am in charge of my choices, which I never used to be. So yeah,
Yeah, I, I'm fairly long in the tooth as well. And sometimes I'm also not there yet. It's, there meaning completely unshamed, completely, have no voice that tells me that I'm bad or selfish or spoiled or pathetic, or more recently, stupid. Um, but, and I don't know if we'll ever get to a place where humans don't have that voice. I mean, sometimes I like to look at evolution from the perspective of physical, like biological evolution. And, we humans still have an appendix, although we don't need it. And I'm guessing that if humans make it, eventually we will be born without an appendix. And I like to think that maybe it's the same for shame. That at one time evolutionarily we needed shame, just like we needed an appendix, but that we will grow out of that need, but we're not there yet. So how do we, as you say, reassure ourselves in the meantime while we still have a brain that offers us shit thoughts about ourselves?
it's interesting, isn't it? Because in alternative medicine, we think that the appendix and your wisdom teeth, your spleen, there are various bits of us that Western medicine thinks it's okay to cut out. And actually, the appendix is something that we think really we still need for our immune systems.
Mm.
I think that I heard this wonderful, I wish I could name who they were, but I heard this wonderful woman being interviewed the other day. And the whole topic was imposter syndrome. And this wonderful kind of journalist kind of went on and on about how, surely you must get rid of it. And this wonderful woman was just so in her own presence. And she went, no, I never want to get rid of it. And he said, but what do you mean? And she said, well, I think it keeps me very humble. And while she was talking, it reminded me of when people used to say, Catherine, you appear to be so confident and you've done so well, or whatever it was. At those times, they weren't obviously talk about the things I hadn't done well with. But I used to think, what are they talking about? The one thing I know I don't have is confidence. Because when I used to work in a clinical environment, I didn't necessarily know what I was doing confidently. And that was what kept me really valuing and working with the patient humbly. And I think my humility, not my confidence, actually worked in that environment. And I now think that lots of these things, imposter syndrome, even shame. I mean, now I can almost taste shame. Shame, the taste of it will tell me something's going on somewhere, and I really value that. Do you see what I mean? That's
I
reassuring
do.
me.
Yeah. And I think that speaks also to, I mean, we are all connected and the same in a lot of ways. And what's reassuring to you might not be reassuring to me, or vice versa. And I like to think about the idea, like, like, do I need to be checked? And back to, your um, idea for this talk in the first place, right? Is how do we reassure ourselves? And I'm kind of losing my train of thought here. Um, Being checked by the outside world,
Yeah.
being told by the outside world, are you okay? Are you not okay? Are you good, bad, etc. Um, so we have an internal uh, impulse,
Mm.
right, that says, yes, this, I I like to work with my patients this way, or my clients, or whoever, right? And I find that humility serves me, and
Mm.
that's conscious, and it's coming from inside of me. It's
Mm.
not somebody else checking me and saying, no, 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 that's not okay.
Yeah.
And so for me, the it's the, is this voice of shame or uh, imposter complex, or whatever you want to call it, is that coming from me, and is it my value, or is it somebody else shoulding me? Am I is this something that is, I'm being checked from outside, and do I need to be checked from some outside force or some outside person in order to know to be humble or to be kind?
Yeah. I
And
mean,
I think that's the crux of it, is that so many of us think we need an outside checking, checking to make sure that we're being okay.
yeah. Yeah. I,
Like, as if we don't have an innate impulse to be kind, humble people.
yeah, and I mean, so the winter season, which we're in right now in the UK anyway, it's. I mean, I personally have learned, and I'm not saying that that's even right. I've learned it for me, and it's right for me, but it might not be right for other people. I've learned to go with nature,
Mhm.
and and to go within her seasons. But I mean, I'm already sort of operating in a way differently from other people, because I was taught that there are 5 seasons within us, not 4. And having learned this particular system, it seems to really work. But I would only support someone learning that if it then worked for them. I'm not saying it has to work for everyone else. And I
Yeah.
think that the winter, interestingly, internally, is a time where we can reassure ourselves that there is enough. And I was doing a job recently, and it was wonderful just stopping, watching through the windows and seeing the little squirrels, really busy getting in all their sort of goodies. And so they were going to sort of be able to know they were safe. They had enough. And I often look at nature and think of the squirrels or whatever, and I go, gosh, even the trees that now have lost everything seemingly, and they're standing rather bravely, starkly, with nothing. no clothes on, as it were. And they're showing me that they know they're enough in their DNA.
Mm.
And I love that concept that, even in the winter when we're quite low and people now know it's okay to kind of talk about, suffering from SAD, sort of, and our vitamin D levels haven't necessarily been filled up enough, and we don't have enough vitamin Bs, and we're not. I spoke to someone earlier, and I said, oh, they wanted to meet me, and I said, oh, great, we'll have some lunch together, and they said, oh no, I don't do that. And I thought to myself, gosh, what an interesting remark. So you're sort of already telling me, which again, I'm not judging, I'm just paying attention to it. You're already telling me that the rhythm of the day is not, you have a completely different rhythm. And I was thinking, well, that's fine, but you're coming to meet me and I'm having lunch. I would, so it's just really interesting. The more we learn to kind of be able to reassure ourselves in our particular way.
Yeah. Yeah. I also look to nature when I can, when I remember. And I love to see how animals are. As you can see, I have a dog here. I also have a cat who is 13 and she recently had surgery. Um, she had a small hernia, and it was when they x-rayed her to look at this hernia just to like sort of get an idea of what was going on, make sure it wasn't a tumor or something. They noticed that she also had two large bladder stones. And so we decided to have surgery to have those stones removed and to have the hernia repaired. It's been 2 weeks. She's actually getting her stitches out today. I'm very excited. Anyway, long story short, this past weekend, my stepson and his wife came over for a visit, and they have a 7-month-old golden retriever puppy.
Oh,
Now, this pup and our cat, I would say they don't hate each other, but they tolerate each other and they live fine. Neither of them are afraid of each other, but they don't snuggle up either. But when this puppy comes over, the cat hightails it out. She goes down in the basement, she goes in the back bedroom, something like that. Well, because she's had this surgery and she's wearing this like thing to keep her from her stitches, right? She stayed in the room where the puppy was, but she growled the entire time. And it occurred to me watching her, because I know her, right? That her natural inclination, which is to run away or fight if she needed to, she couldn't do because she has this thing. And it occurred to me that she could just growl, right? That was what was going to keep her safe. Her other options that her body normally would choose, not her conscious, right, but her body would choose to run away. She didn't have access to that.
yeah.
So she made herself as small as possible, curled up sort of near the fireplace, because she loves the fireplace, especially in the winter. And if the dog got too close, which was, not, it was still pretty far away, but she spent most of the time growling.
Mm.
And I think like you, I have a real fascination with how animals operate, because we are animals
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
And so realizing at some point, like, oh, how brilliant is she? How brilliant is her system? Right? She knew that if she got up and ran away because of her compromised situation, which she knows she has, right? She's got stitches, she's had surgery, even though she's doing very, very well. She knows that running away isn't going to work for her because the puppy will probably run after her. And then what? Can I fight back? I don't know. Can I fight back in this with this cone on and with this, you know?
Yeah.
And it all worked beautifully. The puppy stayed away. She, you know, but I also thought to myself, I don't know what kind of tangent we're going on here,
I think
but
it's all, well,
right, like,
I mean, I think it's all part of, I think it's all part of trusting. You know,
yes, like trusting this, the
yeah,
trusting the wisdom of the body,
yeah,
right? Trusting the wisdom of your body. I need lunch.
yes. I mean, that's, I think I've just done something about, because people probably think I'm crazy, which doesn't, I don't mind.
Yeah, me
Uh,
too.
but it's such a privilege to be so compromised medically and having been born that way, because it does force you to get to know yourself.
Yes.
So what I'm constantly aware of, I think it was Christopher Reeves who, after his accident, he said something amazing, and I'm sorry if I'm misquoting him, but he said something like, before my accident, I felt really sorry for disabled people.
Mm.
And he said, now that I'm disabled, the only people I feel sorry for are the ones who are able-bodied but disabled in their minds.
Yeah.
And that's such a powerful thing, because it's my disabilities that have given me the capacity to reassure myself, not all the time, but most of the time. I mean, I definitely ask, if you're my best friend, I'm more than capable of ringing you up and saying, Karen, I've fallen off the cliff. I don't know whether I'm coming or going. I don't know whether this is my stuff, someone else's stuff, but I'm a complete mess. I've suddenly got so much judgment going on, or whatever it is. But I could communicate that clearly to you, and I could say, if you have the time, could you please give me some reassurance?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel safe enough to go, I've lost the plot.
Yes.
That's very different from this. I mean, I can only talk for myself. I came into my adult life as a people pleasing, traumatized, terrified, shame based, freaked out young woman who
Same.
did not have a clue. I didn't know who to go to. I didn't know what it looked like asking for help. I used to go, if there was a room full of 90 people, most of whom would have been completely decent human beings, I would have found the one person who was so bemused themselves that it was, I was going to say a very rude word then. It would have been a disaster. I'll use that word. And now I, most of the time, I don't find that one person in the 90 that actually I have no business being with, unless, I don't mean this kind of really as horribly as it sounds, unless they're paying me a lot of money to unravel the mess that
Yeah.
they act out of. And I'm not saying they are. The huge distinction.
Yeah, I love to use the metaphor or analogy of like a lens or glasses that we put on, right? Or that were put on us and that we see through. And that's how, I totally relate to what you just said about being a young woman at one time in my life who had no clue and had no connection to myself. That to me is the essence of trauma, is that disconnection from self.
Yeah.
Right? To know, like, actually, when that one person in the room of 90 right? Like maybe I need to growl like a little bit, right? Just like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
I mean,
And
sorry.
instead, it's like being drawn like a magnet.
Yeah. But you see, it took a really wise woman to turn around to me, because I remember going and sitting in front of her and being in complete despair about myself. I wasn't in despair about the world, about my circumstances, about my condition, my illness, my job, nothing. I was in despair about me. And she looked at me with such kindness when she said, "Spit it out if you can." And I said, "I'm such an idiot. Why am I drawn to somebody who doesn't know how to be kind, doesn't know how to be loving?" And this
Well,
darling woman said to me, she said, "Because you need to unravel those barbed wired bits that have been left in you by other people. You will keep on being drawn to those circumstances until you finally are able to get the barbed wire out of you, because it has no business being inside you and it's hurting you. You're not talking to me about your mother dying. You're not talking to me about the surgery that you're going towards. You're not talking about the grief, the shock." And she listed 10 things that I could have been in despair about, but I wasn't. I was in despair about me, because apparently God, the universe, had made a mistake in having me around. I mean, how sad is that? And you've got all these young kids now who are putting ink on their bodies. Sorry to offend anybody, you know, kind of. I'm an acupuncturist, for goodness sake, and they're putting screws everywhere through their noses. They're using medical points as a sort
mm,
of fashion accessory,
mhm.
or they're putting injections in goodness knows what. They're moving their breast to their bottom, and I don't in any way want to judge that as morally wrong. But if you're doing it because you're empty and you feel like I did, that I was a waste of space, then please, please let me sit with you and begin to show you how okay you are. You're not a waste of space. You're not a failure.
And it's so interesting how we want to and need to learn how to reassure ourselves, and we need a model for that. We need somebody who knows how to do that for themselves. And also, we, as you said, right, we are not, we need it from other people. I think we get this becomes another binary, right? Either I know how to talk myself up and reassure myself, and I don't need anyone else to do that for me, and I shouldn't need anyone else to do that for me. Or I can only get it from other people. I will never be able to get it from myself. And I think it's in that either or, right? That is part of the problem, because we need both. But either we can't, you and I probably weren't able to give it to ourselves until someone showed us how, not so much telling us how, but they were doing it for themselves, and we happened to meet them along the way and had a role model. Because I know for me, my mother modeled not being able to do it for herself, even though on the surface it looked kind of like what you were saying before about, appearing confident, but not feeling confident, right? When I think about my mom and what she modeled, it was all an appearance of strength and uh, dogged independence. um, But yeah, we need to be able to offer it to ourselves and receive it from others as well.
Yeah, I think it was quite interesting because one of the things that I decided very early on in my life was I started focusing on the kind of person that I would like to become. And I wanted to be somebody that would eventually be able to be an example of healthy behavior, and healthy examples. And I hope, to the best of my ability, that one of the things I've ended up really liking about myself is I don't like perfectionism. I don't want it. I don't agree with it. I don't, if you watch nature, it's not perfect. And yet it consistently shows up each season. And I don't have to be perfect, but I would like to consistently show up for another human being. I'd like to be able to say, I'm sorry, I screwed up.
Oh my goodness. I've been doing that a lot lately, and as soon as you started saying that about perfection, I saw something on Facebook that I have to share it. I just have to share it. And am I going to be able to find it quickly? um, I think I will. It's a quote. Things that are perfect are dead things, empty things, a silence beyond change or challenge, an end point, a blank page. You are a wonderfully messy thing, an impossible thing made of iron and rainwater, meat and electricity, a dream with teeth. You're too good for perfection.
The most reassuring thing for me, anyway, is to know that I don't have to.
And it's in the in the psychological world, especially around parent-child relationships, but it's all relationships. There's the term called repair, right? Because, as you said, we are going to mess up. We are not perfect. We are going to be rude sometimes. We're going to be mean sometimes. We're going to be petty. We're going to be hurt, and we're going to act out of our hurt, not because we're awful, terrible, evil people, right? And something I've really been paying attention to this past year and want to continue to do is to notice, with kindness for myself, with reassurance for myself, when I'm not being who I want to be, which doesn't mean perfect, but it means when I'm not being who I want to be, I might be petty or mean or critical, and I don't repair. The person I want to be is not the person who's never mean or critical or petty. It's being able to catch myself when I am, and then making the repair with whomever,
Yeah.
if that relationship is important to me, right? Yeah. And it has been, I almost get kind of giddy when I catch myself. I'm thinking of a couple of examples that with my husband, in the past year or so, when in the middle of being about something, I was like, oh, the reason I feel this way is because I have this thought. This thing that was given to me, that I'm stupid. And my husband's not saying he's not telling me I'm stupid. He just said something, and it came through the lenses, and I went, I got,
You
because
growled.
I growled because it's safe. It's okay for me to growl with my husband.
Yeah.
But then I was able to go, oh, the reason I am like feeling this way is because everything you just said came through my lens, came through my filter of I'm stupid. And I wanted to hand it right back to you and be like, I'm not stupid, you're stupid.
Yeah.
And it's so, I mean, my whole body is kind of vibrating thinking about this, right? It's so much fun to be that imperfect.
Yeah. That's
So
the
because
adventure.
yes, that's the adventure. And then when you make this repair, right? It's like you have to screw up in order to make the repair. Making the repair can feel so amazing
Yeah.
that then you become, your relationships become that much more delicious
Well,
because I'm not trying to be perfect anymore.
so there are two things. When I look back, the mother that I ended up having this lifetime, if you believe there are other lifetimes, but now definitely wasn't the mother that probably she would have liked to have been. And
Same,
she didn't have the mother
same.
and back and back and back. Okay. Now, none of them knew they had these diseases that, kind of was getting worse like an avalanche through our generations. So they were up against unimaginable for most people horrors, really. But I began at a very early age, I began knowing that she was very ill, my mother. And I knew that the real fundamental illness that she really had underneath everything else, and I didn't for a long, long time realize that we were both carrying this horrible thing. She hated herself.
Hmm.
So no wonder I was in despair about myself.
Yeah, exactly. Same.
She couldn't reassure herself. Now,
Exactly. Yeah.
part of my choosing who I wanted to become was I wanted to become somebody that actually lived the adventure of actually being human, not perfect. And I adored my mother. I remember a counselor trying to get me to admit that I hated my mother. And I wouldn't, just wouldn't do it because despite the fact that I was a people pleaser, I knew it was a lie. So I wasn't prepared to say I hated her because I, in fact, didn't. I knew I loved her. I knew I didn't like her behavior, but I knew her behavior wasn't her.
Well,
Well,
I didn't know that when I was.
I goodness knows how I knew that.
There's lots of things I knew, but I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I had a very Karen. I had an amazing father who I think, when I say I knew, I think my father somehow loved my mother so much that he had worked it out, I think. But I love, I mean, I see young people around me nowadays, and I love being able to see in their faces that I'm giving them permission, not verbally, but I'm giving them permission to be outrageously ludicrous and to laugh at myself and to have fun, to, I mean, I don't know about your culture, but the English culture has in my opinion, an absolutely dreadful thing that we still, I think it's getting worse, not better. It's like, in order to do anything, we have to be good at it because otherwise we'll make a fool of ourselves. Well, how on earth? I mean, beginning to decide I was going to be an author and beginning to decide that I was going to run a membership or do podcasts or do videos or whatever. I mean, I've had spinach in my teeth. I've looked at the wrong bit. I mean, I've still got so much to learn in all of these different areas. I still can't get my head round, I don't know, Kindle publishing, or I mean, I'm hopeless and useless at lots and lots of stuff. Am I slowly getting better at it? Some of it, yes. Am I still hopeless? Yes, it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay.
I think in the US, we have a similar thing. You know, you have to be perfect. Don't bother unless it's going to be top notch. I think also we probably have some more rebelliousness, which is baked in. um, but that perfectionism runs deep, and I too, I have a little podcast that I do when I feel like it, and I don't have an editor, and I don't, you know, I, like I've been in groups, people that I know, things that certifications that I've done, and you meet all these people, and there's the book people, because I've written books too, and uh, you know, the people that the coaches, the online business world, right? And I hear some of them talking about, well, I think I want to start a podcast, and but I have to be consistent, and I'm going to have somebody who knows how to do the right intro and outro and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, I'm going to have a podcast, and if I can't do it by myself easily, I'm not going to do it. And sometimes my cat comes in and meows during it, and I think, oh, and I'll just say, okay, the cat's meowing, and I'm just going to keep going. I'm not going to edit that out.
Uh,
So I'm with you.
it's very reassuring. I am gonna I am actually gonna have to draw this to a close, because I can tell that
Yes.
it's not gonna need, but it's so reassuring to know that it's okay to be human. It's a complete fallacy that we have to lie about the messiness and the chaos. And when anybody shoulds me on any flipping subject, then I can feel myself already shutting down, which is the equivalent of growling like your cat, which is totally appropriate.
I think that's what I think. There we are. We've wrapped it up.
Karen, don't go anywhere, but I'm going to stop recording. And I'm going to thank you hugely, because I know that people are really going to love having met you. And we'll put the links to your books when this goes out.
Awesome. Thank
And
you.
I highly recommend you do your research work, Karen, and read her books. If you identify with anything that Karen and I have honestly talked about,